about riots. This is my feeling. I support your right to protest.
Correct.
But I'm not going to one of those. You know why? Because I think protests are a lot like war. Let me explain to you. You ever catch a fish? You know, when you catch a fish, the moment that fish is on the line, your whole body gets excited. Like, oh shit, shit. Yeah. That is an ancient thing that is in us because it used to be that was survival. If you caught that fish, your family was going to have food. That's why you get so excited.
Oh my gosh. Did you just see the fish? I got a fish. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I can reach my hand in there. Oh my gosh. Marion, look at what I caught with the drone. It's a huge freaking bass. Tell me the numbers on my GoPro are rolling.
Yes,
look at the size of this. Holy cows. Holy cows. Oh my gosh. This is the biggest fish. Oh my God. Please, please, please stay. Please stay. Please stay. Please stay. Look at this. This is who sees this? Who sees this? Oh, my gloves are stuck in his things. You've all seen me fish, and I don't often catch fish on camera. I just caught this. It's so big. I can't even get the camera to fill this fish in.
This was yesterday.
Fucking mouth is as big as my fist. I'm gonna weigh this fish. Holy cow! This is the biggest bass I've ever caught in my life. This thing's like 2 feet long. Oh my goodness.
Is there anybody out there who doesn't love fishing? The funniest thing is this. I feel kind of stupid now. I told Marion, my wife, who's a neuroscientist, I was like, I never even thought of it the way Joe Rogan explained it in that podcast with Mexican OT. I never thought about the physiology, the neuroscience behind why I freak out every single time I catch a fish. And Marion looks at me and she says, what's your problem? And then she goes on to say, you would have been a hunter back in the day as opposed to a gatherer. The person who runs out into danger, gets that neurophysiological thrill from the catch. You would have been the hunter and other people would have stayed and been the gatherer. And then she goes like one level deeper than that. And then she says, your grandfather, the only man in your family to have left Poland in 1936, give or take, he was a hunter. And the others were gatherers, sedentary, and weren't into the adventure of the unknown. It's going to make a dark joke, but and that ended the way it ended. But I never thought about what it feels, why you get that physiological response when you hook a fish. And then Rogan puts it in my head like, holy crap, it's an ancient response. You're going to eat, you're going to survive another day. And if you lose this fish, you might not eat, you might not survive another day. And then I had to, loop it in with the drone fishing top 5 moment of my life. And I don't know what's going to be able to knock that one out of the top 5. I don't think anything will. The other one was kayak fishing from Venise, Quebec. The biggest pike I ever caught. No net. It literally jumped into the boat. And then what was the last one? The last one was the bass that I caught yesterday. Guys, dude, I don't catch fish like this all the time. And it's like the one time I go out to do a Viva vlog, talk about the Trump trial. And I couldn't do it because there was this fountain making noise. And I'm like, well, okay, I'll just fish then, I guess. And then I catch this monster. And the blue steel face was not on purpose. I could fit my fist in that fish's mouth. It was so big and beautiful. By the way, also just to address a couple of things, some people said, isn't it illegal to fish with a drone? Funny story behind that. When I caught that fish off the drone, this was in Quebec in, I want to say 6 years ago, 2018, give or take. It was absolutely not against the law back in the day. I did some interviews. WCAX Vermont calls me up and says, we saw your video. It's hilarious. You want to do an interview? I do an interview. I go on Vermont WCAX. We do an interview. Everyone loved it. Reporters are laughing hysterically. A week later, someone sends me a link and says, Viva, David, did you know that they published something of a follow-up correction? Mea culpa? I was like, no, send me the link. They did a follow-up a week later they all had their stern, solemn faces on, like, last week we showed you a video of a man who caught a fish with a drone. And then we immediately got calls as to whether or not this is legal. In fact, it's illegal in Vermont. And so they, sorry, I get distracted. They said it was in fact illegal in Vermont at the time, because you're not allowed fishing with the assistance of a drone, as if it makes it any easier. Having a loud burring plane dragging a jitterbug makes it easier. It doesn't make it easier, but I understand how you could use drones for fishing to make it, to give you an unfair advantage. If you scope out where the fish are, if you scare the fish inland, I mean, I could think of ways. Canada subsequently updated their drone laws and included a provision, which I like to pretend is the Viva provision, that says you cannot transport a living animal via drone. So now I do wonder whether or not that would be illegal in Canada. I would argue that I'm not transporting a fish when I fish with the drone, but whatever. Better off avoiding the arguments than raising them. And that's it. Holy crab apples, people. Take one day off to do an episode of The Unusual Suspects, a banger of an episode. Check it out if you haven't seen it yet. I sent it out to locals, Twitter, etc. The Unusual Suspects. Take one day off, and there's almost too much to cover. Today, we're going to cover Dexter Taylor got convicted. He's the ghost gun guy with an arsenal of weapons that he built himself in his New York apartment. Convicted, whisked off to Rikers. I'm going to talk about that when we are live on Rumble, YouTube, and vivabarneslaw.locals.com, because I want to give that story the maximum blast that it can. Also, before we go to Rumble exclusively, Pennsylvania. The madness hasn't reached peak communist insanity in Pennsylvania. Robert Barnes, my partner-in-law for the Sunday show and our wonderful vivabarneslaw.locals.com community, did a bourbon with Barnes the other night, talking about another file that he and 1776 Law Center are getting involved in. It's going to blow your freaking mind. I've said that now 3 days in a row. And every time I say it, I think of the buffoon from the Adam Sandler, they're all going to laugh at you skit. It blew my freaking mind. It's going to blow your mind what's going on in Pennsylvania. There's no end to the tyrannical communist madness. They've jailed 2 people, no trial, no nothing, for 30 days from what the Lancaster Agriculture is reporting, because allegedly, some freaking administrative tribunal issued something that looks like a warrant that has apparently no legal, criminal, civil probative value, sent it to some sheriffs who then locked up these guys for purported violations of some order of some administrative tribunal, from what I understand. We'll talk about that. Then we're going to get into Trump. Joe Neerman is coming on at give or take 12:30-ish. Then we're going to end on YouTube, and we're going to go over to Rumble and vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Finish the stream. We've got another fun guest coming on at 1-ish. to talk about how she was on the New York bestseller list for all of 12 hours before she was corruptly removed from the list. It's an interesting story. It'll also just highlight the value or lack thereof of the New York Times bestseller list. Then we're going to go to vivabarneslaw.locals.com for our exclusive after party. That's the way it works. Viva Frei, David Frei, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida Rumbler. There was one thing I wanted to announce before I forgot. Saturday, there is a Spartan Race out in Boca area. And I was fortunate enough to have been given an opportunity to offer this as a perk, as a fundraiser of sorts. It's a little short notice, so I wasn't really able to do very much with it. But bottom line, anybody who wants to run the Spartan Race, if you go subscribe to an annual subscription at vivabarneslaw.locals.com, I will be able to get your email address and get you into the race if you so choose. In fact, even if you subscribe as a supporter on vivabarneslaw.locals.com, it's $10 a month or $100, the discount rate for a year. I'll send you the email anyhow, and you can choose to use or not use the Spartan Race ticket. I'm going to be there. I'm going to run it at least once. It's a cool 3 miles. I could probably run that 5 times without a water bag. What are they called? A Camelback. And it's also available for all supporters. If you're interested, I put up a post. Just let me know, and I'll get your email and get you in there. Okay. That's that. That's the good news, the fishing, the fun news, the race. And now let's get into the hair-pulling, madness-inducing bad news of the day. And it's bad news. Some people are going to say, FAFO, fuck around, find out. I can appreciate it because somebody was FAFOing, and now they are off at Rikers Island. It's surreal when you think about it. for those of you who are new to the channel or sufficiently new or missed a stream last week, I had on a gentleman named Dexter Taylor. Carbon Mike on, let me make sure I can get his proper Twitter handle. Carbon Mike. Oh, come on. What's the problem here? Carbon Mike. It's Carbon Mike on Twitter. Yeah, here we go. Oh, because his Twitter handle is Future Radio Cast. Future Radio Cast. He's a gentleman. Race doesn't matter. And there's no but. Dexter believes that, or at least during our interview, raised it as a relevant factor, that they are prosecuting someone who has no criminal record, who is value added to society, because he was building ghost guns in his apartment in New York, not selling them, not carrying them, not get caught with them in his car. He's a black man, and he got arrested, raided, FBI raided. There was the ATF was in there as well, but it might not have been the FBI. It was the ATF and police got raided. Dexter Taylor, they raid his apartment because he was buying these kits and making his own firearms at home. And he made 13 of these things. Some of them were AR-15 style rifles. Others were handguns. He was buying these kits that they sell. I knew none of this. Manufacturing, making them at home. He would machine out parts that you needed for like the handle or whatever. I know nothing about, or very little about firearms. I shouldn't say that. I know enough to have passed my firearm license up in Canada. And he had built some 13 firearms over the years. They get his information from the places that are selling these kits to assemble firearms. They raid him. The news at the time says, arsenal of firearms seized at New York man's apartment. Let me just make sure I can do this here. Dexter Taylor. Am I going to find the article here? Arrested. Let's see here. Well, I'm not going to find it. It doesn't matter. The headline was arsenal of firearms, arsenal of weapons found at New York man's apartment. He went on trial because this is unlawful possession of a firearm in the state of New York. It has to be registered with the state, from what I understand, and these were not registered. He was in trial last week and the week before and this week, or the last week and this week, and he was able to do interviews after court, and we did an amazing interview where he was defiant, unapologetic, and said basically this is the government's way of telling certain demographics, shut up and we'll take care of you. You're not able to take care of yourself. He was arrested, prosecuted, notwithstanding the Bruin decision, which came down from the Supreme Court, which New York State swiftly said, we're not going to respect. We're going to redraft regulations and try to circumvent or outright ignore the Supreme Court precedent in Bruin, which reaffirmed Second Amendment rights for the purposes of self-defense. He had his trial. I don't think he seemed optimistic because, look, I'm realistic and maybe even a little cynical now. I said, like, the law is the law. You're going to get a bunch of jury members out there who say, well, the law says you have to register your firearm with the state. Did you do that? No. Bang. Convicted. It's a no-brainer. I suspect he was hoping for some form of jury nullification. I suspect he was hoping, I don't know what public backlash might influence the jury. Maybe he was hoping that the jury themselves would say, if he can't do this, I can't do this. None of us have Second Amendment rights. The city is going to shit. We can't get on the metro. Dexter was very happy that some of the jury members were working class people. I said, yeah, they'll have to take the metro to work, or the subway, as you call it in America, and they'll know what happens when people can't defend themselves. They've seen the incidents in the subways. They've seen the violence. Maybe they'll be sympathetic. But at the end of the day, I think he was hoping for jury nullification. It went into deliberation the day before yesterday. He's texting me and saying, we're in deliberation, or at least I'm getting the info. We're in deliberation. I was like, how do you feel? How do you think I feel? And that's it. Convicted, hauled off to Rikers Island. Like, it's not a joke. There's no like, okay, you can go home, wait for your sentencing, and then appeal, and maybe you'll get authorization to post bond pending appeal, because if you start serving your sentence and then you're ultimately acquitted on appeal, because there are constitutional issues to be raised on appeal, that, from what I understand, could not be raised during the jury trial. No, hauled off to Rikers Island. And when we were doing the interview, Dexter's like, they want to put me in jail. They want to take a value-added, contributing citizen and throw him in jail and make him a burden of the state. Not only can he not make money, he's going to cost the state money. This is a man with no criminal record. He's got a kid. He's got an ex-wife. Hauled off to Rikers Island. He was explaining what happened when he was initially arrested and they haul him off. And I think it was Rikers as well. And he spent a week there before he could get out. And it's like, it was actually an interesting experience. It was actually, his experience wasn't horrifying or horrific. And he met some cellmates and they talked and it was bonding and that's it. Now he's been hauled off. So convicted by the jury, swiftly hauled off to Rikers Island, where, he'll have his appellate rights. And then in the meantime, the productive tax-paying member of society has now been turned into a burden of the state, a burden for the people. And he's in living hell. I don't care if it's like not as living hell as Alcatraz. He's in living hell until he can either successfully get bail pending appeal or until he succeeds on appeal. Because from what he explained during the interview, he could not mention the Second Amendment. He could not mention the Constitution during the trial. And the way, from what I understand, from what he explained, is that they'll try the law. They will convict him based on the black and white letter of the law. And then he can raise constitutional arguments before the higher courts, not before the jury. And that's it. So Dexter, a man, has had, a portion of his life to be determined how much stolen from him. And he's hauled off. Now people are going to say, well, that's the law of Texas. If you don't like it, New York. If you don't like it, move to Texas. And Dexter's point in that, he didn't say it during our interview. He said it in another interview that I heard. He's like, the commie fascist statist tactics, whatever you want to call them. I'm going with communists these days because it has a better ring to it than statist. Statist does not have the negative connotation that communist does. But it's basically the same thing. It's like, yeah, I give all my powers to the state. He said in one of the other interviews, now I just lost my train of thought. Oh, crap. Oh, come on. I just forgot what I was going to say. Chat, what was the sentence that I was just on? I forget now. This is why I shouldn't read the chat. It'll come back to me in a second. But, wow, it's going to drive me crazy. The state is full commie. That's not what I was getting at. Escaped. Oh, that's right. Thank you very much, Paul Freeman. So in another interview, I didn't ask him this question. He said, everyone's like, well, just leave. This is what you get for living in a crime-infested commie shithole. And he says, do you think the commies, the fascists, the statists are going to stop at New York? Where in the history of humankind have they said, well, we're happy with our current borders? It's not a bad argument. So like the argument's going to be, where am I going to go? I'm going to go flee to Texas. I'm going to go flee to Florida. I mean, my answer to that would be, yeah, and wage the effective political war from Texas or from Florida. It's very tough to stay in Canada where you are literally silenced, literally shut up, literally have your assets frozen, literally denied the ability to make a living. It's very difficult to fight the political war effectively when they literally silence you and bankrupt you. And he was more defiant. He says, I'm going to stay here. I'm born and raised in New York, and I'm going to stay here and fight the political war here. Well, now he's in jail, and I want to put that on as much blast as humanly possible. Yeah, and then people say, Viva, it's not that easy for me to leave New York. It's not. And I was talking about this with somebody else the other day. I'm having done it now, and I'm glad I didn't know what was going to be involved in doing it. It's an investment to flee. I mean, an investment. It's an expense. It's a wildly costly proposition. I had no idea, and it's almost better to jump off the cliff, not knowing what's below, and hope to grow your wings, as opposed to knowing the spikes and the tetanus infested needles that are at the bottom, and then being fearful of not growing your wings because you're going to land in that. If I had known what it cost, it might have been a deterrent in the first place. It's prohibitively costly in all respects, complicated, stressful, and so yeah, I'm sensitive to that. Not everybody has the option or the luxury, but those that leave, like my grandfather, leave Poland in 1936 with, I don't know if it was $20 in his pocket, but it wasn't meaningful money. Leave, and then you come somewhere naked as the day you were born to start anew. We can start it. Free Carbon Mike. Make a trend on Twitter. I don't know how. Who are you going to get political support from for this in New York? Hochul? Itchbay wants to jab up 6-month-old babies and more. You're not going to get political support from who? From Leticia James? Good luck with that. See, and I don't like the word globalist either, because that has too much of another connotation. I mean, it is globalism. It's one world government. It's basically suppression of all individual rights for the state. That's why statist is better. Globalists are statists. Who knows? I'm just maybe mixing up terms here. So that's Carbon Mike. And like an idiot, I didn't make sure that we were live on all platforms. We are live on all platforms. Okay, good. That's Carbon Mike. It's very sad. It's very depressing. Like, he goes away, and now I realize, like, holy crap, how am I supposed to get in touch with him? And I'm find other means. How's he supposed to communicate with the world? That's it. And I appreciate it's the judicial system. Someone gets convicted of murder, they get whisked off to jail and go ahead and appeal. But this is a human. This is a human that I got to know. And this is a human who I happen to think is very sympathetic and not a criminal. And now he's off in Rikers Island for up to 18 years because that's what the sentence can carry. All right. Other depressing bullshit, if I may swear, because it's early, but it doesn't matter. Other depressing bullshit. Listen to this. Barnes talked about it on a Bourbon with Barnes the other night. Lancaster, Pennsylvania pub. Why do I remember that from an SNL skit involving Dan Aykroyd? From a tiny hamlet in western Pennsylvania. I remember Dan Aykroyd. Okay, so hold on a second. What's going on here? Because I don't want to see this. This is a story which will, again, blow your freaking mind. This is the way it's being reported by Lancaster Farming. And I'm saying this non-judgmentally. I don't know what kind of news outlet Lancaster Farming is. Livestock ultrasound operators jailed. You've read the headline, right? These are not drug dealers. These are not murderers. These are not illegal immigrants committing crimes, beating up police officers. No. Livestock ultrasound operators jailed. Why? Accused of unlicensed vet practice. Holy shit. Okay, I'm skeptical. And this is not even going to be highly critical of what's going on. I don't think they know the details of what's going on. But they ran that headline. And then there's going to be people out there saying, Fafo, fudge around, find out. You don't want to you don't want to do the time? Don't do the crime. Practicing veterinary, what did it say here? I mean, I can't even get over this. Unlicensed vet practice landing you in jail on a warrant for your arrest for, what was it, 30 days, I think? And here, listen to this. 2 Pennsylvania men operating a dairy reproduction service. Do you know what that's called? Farming. 2 Pennsylvania farmers, or men involved in farming, are in prison. And I presume they're using words properly, not jail, but prison, following a complaint of practicing veterinary medicine without a license. This is what Pennsylvania's got to worry about. 2 dudes ultrasounding cows to see if they're pregnant for the purposes of farming. Rusty Herr, 43, was booked at Lancaster County Prison on April 11, while Ethan Wentworth, 33, was sent to York County Prison on April 10. By the way, go watch Bourbon with Barnes from the night before last if you want to see an angry Barnes. Herr and Wentworth are listed as operating partners of Airville-based No Bull Solutions, LLC. I'm going to go to that website after this just so we can see this here. Copy. Veterinarians, well, Barnes's theory is correct. He says, I suspect this is not, organic. I suspect this is competitive. This might be people who don't like who these people are working with. Veterinarians have made multiple complaints about, quote, the illegal practice of veterinary medicines by unlicensed individuals employed by No Bull Solutions, end quote, according to a complaint filed with the Department of State, in 2020 by the Pennsylvania Veterinary Medicine Association. Oh, so a state association of Pennsylvania going after farmers. Sound familiar? Amos Miller, Amish farmers, the war on what we can eat, see, think, drink, put in our bodies. The complaint alleges that people employed by No Bull were doing ultrasounds and making diagnoses. Like what? You're pregnant? Holy shit. I didn't realize that when I looked at my wife when she was a big bell. I was like, you're pregnant. I was practicing medicine without a license. I didn't realize that when we did the little pee-pee test and it came back positive, we were practicing medicine. If I had done that with my dog, I would have been convicted of practicing veterinary medicine without a license. Holy crap. I'm happy I wasn't in Pennsylvania when I pulled out one of my dog's rotten teeth. Holy crap. I could be in jail. The document cites reports from Veterinary Association members and posts on Facebook. Well, there's nothing more reliable than that. In 2010, Hare was ordered to pay $3,500 fine and cease and desist from unlicensed practice of veterinary medicine. Oh, was it for the same thing? Was it for diagnosing pregnant cows? Wentworth got a cease and desist in 2018, along with a $3,000 civil penalty. How the hell then did he end up in prison, if I may ask the obvious, ignorant Quebec schnook attorney, former attorney questions? The 2020 complaint alleges that Hare and Wentworth continued to practice veterinary medicine without a license and hired others to do the same. Are we still talking ultrasounds for the purposes of determining if pregnancy has occurred? According to the dairy farmer Ben Meesmore, who is acting spokesman for Hare and Wentworth, both men were advised by their former attorneys not to pay the fines or appear in court because they don't see an issue with using ultrasound for reproductive services such as pregnancy checks. You know who else doesn't see a problem with that and shouldn't? Every freaking person with half a brain and half an iota of intellectual honesty, which might incidentally exclude basically all Democrats. Sorry to get political. Progressives, I should say. So I don't, small d Democrats, not bad. Big D Democrats, criminals. He said they're each serving 30-day sentences in prison without bail. Holy merciful hell. This is coming from one, they don't seem very critical. This is like, oh yeah, well, this is what happens. Ultrasound a cow, say it's pregnant, jail. Oh, you didn't pay the $3,000 civil fine. Jail for 30 days without bail. Well, it makes sense. It makes sense in communism. It makes sense in North Korea. 13 years hard labor after a 1-hour trial for Otto Warmbier. That makes sense in North Korea. Pennsylvania, congratulations. You're on par with New York in terms of North Korea level tyranny. Maysmore, who's involved with Hare and Wentworth in unrelated business, said the law governing veterinary practice is vague and doesn't cover ultrasounding, which is a common practice on dairy farms, he said. No shiat Sherlock. I know of up to 20 individuals in the state using ultrasound for reproduction. Anyone can purchase one. They are readily available today, he said. Numerous dairy farmers in Lancaster, Lebanon. York, surrounding countries depend on the services of No Bull, and the operators' arrest has caused problems for those farms, Mason. Well, they don't care how many cows die. Go to the state-sanctioned, the state-licensed veterinarians. Oh, you want to know if your cow's pregnant? You want to know if it took? Go to the state-licensed veterinary doctors, whatever you want to call them. Nobody else gets to do it unless they're licensed. And even, well, that's what I presume is going to be the argument. Pennsylvania Veterinary Medicine Association deferred comments to the Department of the State, which said it couldn't confirm or deny an investigation due to confidentiality statutes. Do you know what it's called, locking people up and then hiding it? It's called communism. It's called what you accuse Vladimir Putin of. It's called what North Korea Kim Jong-un actually does. Search for Pennsylvania licensing system verification didn't turn up any veterinary license for, I don't think that's the argument. The department reviews every potential Practice Act violation of which it becomes aware, whether that is through a complaint filed directly to the department, a notification, or through media reports, okay, et cetera, et cetera. Let me see here. In the State Board of Veterinary Medicine, if the State Board of Veterinary Medicine is going to interpret ultrasound as practicing medicine, the law needs to be changed, Mazemore said. This really affects every single one of us. They're in jail for 30 days without bail, apparently. Barnes is on it. There's a little procedure in law called habeas corpus, show me the body. It's what civilized societies have and what civilized societies respect. I do not travel to countries that do not have habeas corpus rules. The only problem is I'm in a country now that doesn't seem to respect habeas corpus rules. A recording on the phone line is listed, Noble Solution, yada, yada, yada. The message urges callers to contact the veterinary board and local lawmakers to express their concern about the situation. A No Bull Solution LLC fund has been set up on a Give, Send, Go. Give me that for 1 second. And at local banks. For more information, call 717-887-6465. And I would encourage everyone to call for more information and expose this egregious corruption. I'm just going to read something. I'm going to read something that I'm not showing the warrant because it has an address on it, and I didn't take the time to bleep out an address, and I ain't getting into trouble. The alleged warrant, pursuant to which these gentlemen were whisked up and jailed for 30 days with no bail because of an unpaid civil fine from a tribunal that apparently doesn't have the authority to jail in the first place. You're going to see my ugly punum. Hold on. In the matter of the State Board of Veterinary Medicine investigative subpoena duces tecum, that means subpoena, you bring the documents with you, at the BPOA. I have to Google what that acronym stands for. Oh, the Bureau of Professional and Occupational Affairs. I'm sorry, I'm going to get angry. Since when in the hell, in what satanic universe does the Bureau of Professional and Occupational Affairs have the authority to lock anybody up? Can you imagine this? Can you imagine the Bar Society issuing a, whatever the hell they call this, a warrant, investigate, what are they calling this thing? A warrant of arrest to the sheriff of Lancaster County, who might, as Barnes intimated in his Bourbon with Barnes, you might want to start thinking twice about mitigating your losses here, minimizing your damages here, because something tells me a lot of people are going to start getting sued for civil rights violations. Something tells me that. It's Barnes. And when Barnes says things like that, it's not for nothing. You are hereby commanded to take into custody the body of Rusty Hare. Bear in mind, I'm going to vomit. This is coming from the Bureau of Professional and Occupational Affairs, telling the sheriff, you are hereby commanded to take into custody the body of Rusty Hare of the address. Holy crap, I almost read it. I'm an idiot. If he can be found at this Commonwealth, and bring him to the Lancaster County Prison for immediate incarceration because he has been adjudicated in contempt of this court. That would be, I presume, the Bureau of Professional Occupational Affairs. Adjudicated in contempt of this court's November 30, 2021 order, and has failed to purge himself as directed by this court's order dated May 16, 2023. The proto-notary, a fancy word, as far as I understand, of clerk, not a notary, but a proto-notary, or protho-notary, I don't know if it's a hard T or a soft TH, is directed to send copies of this warrant to the Lancaster County Sheriff and the warden of the Lancaster County Prison at the following address. What? I don't want to swear again. It's too early. Holy shit. This is the Bureau of, what do they call it? I got to remember it. The Bureau of Professional and Occupational Affairs drafts up a warrant for arrest, says the guy didn't pay our civil fine, and sends it to the sheriffs, arrest him and incarcerate him for 30 days with no bail, and they do it? That's where it lies now. Barnes is involved. Barnes is looking into this, and people are going to get sued, and rightly so. So put that on blast. Oh, I'm not having a heart attack. It's a muscle pain because I've been doing my push-ups, but my goodness. The tightness in the chest, you got to breathe down to the diaphragm, crack the back. Oh, Joe Neerman is in the background. Good Logic is here. Another man who has gotten his ass spanked. I said it would. He makes this beautiful motion. It was like, I don't know, what was it, 20 some odd pages, beautifully drafted, why the gag order in Trump's New York trial is unconstitutional, violates not only his First Amendment right, but ours to hear him. He drafts it. He goes, he serves it. He has to reserve it on Leticia James. Nope, get out. And I was like, you're going to have your heart ripped out of your bum, Joe, because I didn't want to be too pessimistic, but I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. Oh, it's all that to say, the battle continues, but let's hear from Joe himself. Sir, 3, 2, 1.
Yo.
How goes the battle, Joe?
Right now, the battle for people to even know about this, to get this beyond the law tube sphere, has been very, very much a struggle. What became evident to me is this is not an argument that is being made by anyone else. It's a very, very important argument that I'm making. It's far beyond Donald Trump. This is about our fundamental freedoms, because there's a precedent that's being set here. And what we're seeing is that the New York court is saying, well, this worked in Washington, this should work here. And it's a precedent that never should be allowed in Washington. And it's the way that we consider situations that a gag order may be entertained by a court. Meaning, the cases that were cited by Judge Merchan when he issued this gag order were Landmark Communications, Shepard v. Maxwell, and Nebraska Association. Those are the 3 cases he cited. And then he looked back also and saying, Judge Hudkin did this, so this works for me also. And those cases do talk about scenarios where you can have a balancing test that might open up the doorway to limiting First Amendment rights. Normally, they were talking about actually freedom of press in those cases. But the point is that you can sort of infringe on the First Amendment rights in certain scenarios. But those scenarios that they talked about were always where the court was interested in protecting someone else's constitutional right. So in all three of those cases, what you had was a media that was being somewhat aggressive. And in 2 out of 3 of them, the media still won. But in only one of them was the media was so egregious in stripping a guy of a right to a fair trial because they were just so invasive in the trial and talking to the jury directly that the Supreme Court said, whoa, that's way too much. But the only time they talk about this balancing test that, look, if it's a very serious, if it's not speculative, it's definitely certain that there's going to be a harm from this expression of First Amendment rights, then we can start thinking about maybe dialing back when it's stepping on someone else's constitutional rights. That's what those cases say. And there's line after line after line in every one of those cases about how terrible it is, and how the purpose of the media of the media is, and the free expression is that we can criticize the government, criticize the judges, basically hold their feet to the fire. That's why we have First Amendment rights. That's why political speech is the most protected speech in the world. And even though this was clearly political speech by virtually any yardstick you can imagine, that to say that in this case where there's no constitutional right that's being protected, Mershon said that the reason we have to do this is in
administration of justice is what he said.
The state's interest. There is no state interest in the fair administration of justice. That's not a constitutional right. Yeah, in Shepard v. Maxwell, where a defendant couldn't get a fair trial because the jury was talking to the media, which hated the defendant during the deliberations and meeting with them in the hallway, that the Supreme Court said, all right, this is crazy. I mean, this is crazy that the media is interfering in this trial so much. So we need to, and they specifically said we need to protect his 14th Amendment due process rights, which were completely ignored by the court, and they didn't care about his 14th Amendment rights. So now Judge Mershon, when there's no constitutional right that's being protected here, and this is what I said in an oral argument, I said in those cases you have one constitutional right of Party A, their First Amendment right, versus another person's due process rights. Over here, we have both of them on the same side of Donald Trump. You have his First Amendment rights, and also that he's concerned that he's going to be prejudiced and that his due process rights are being stripped away. Both constitutional issues are on the same side of the ledger, and you still issue a gag order?
And just to highlight this for everybody, because the insanity was that the judge said we can violate Trump's First Amendment rights or the First Amendment constitutional rights of the defendant for the preservation of the, I'm paraphrasing, the orderly administration of justice or the
state's interest in the fair administration of justice.
Fair administration of justice was the exact word. So there's the thing. We violate an individual citizen's constitutional rights to protect what is not even a constitutional right, but a purported, call it a privilege or call it just nothing, of the state. That was the argument. I get the impression either Mershon did not read the cases or he just takes for granted nobody's going to read the cases and just go on his word of what they say.
Well, in his follow-up order, because he made 2 orders. There was one order on March 26th. And then after that, on March 28th, and he carved out, what did he do? He said, you can't talk about witnesses or anything that they may potentially testify about. You can't talk about potential witnesses. You can't talk about anyone who works for the DA's office aside from the DA. You can't talk about anyone who works for the court aside from the judge. And you can't talk about any jurors. So those are, which is basically all he left that relates to this case at all, is he himself individually and Alvin Bragg individually. And he also said you can't have an agent talk about it. You can't have anyone else tweet out or your lawyers talk about it. You can't talk about any family members of anyone related to those persons. Then what happened was on March 28th, after this first gag order was issued, Trump tweeted out that Judge Mershon's daughter has gotten $7 million from the DNC because she works for a PR company that literally is hired by the DNC, by Kamala Harris, and by the biggest of the bigwigs, and has gotten over the last couple of years $7 million for her PR efforts, and that she's admitted that she's talked about this case with her father. And he was urging that Judge Mershon certainly has to recuse himself from this case because of his interest. And there was even this former judge who went on CNN and said that that's a pretty significant thing, that there's not even supposed to be the appearance of there being anyone within 6 degrees of a judge that he should recuse himself. So that is a very serious thing under New York perspective, that Judge Mershon just basically said, And instead, what does he say? He says, you can't talk about my family members or Alvin Bragg's family members, as if it was about the daughter. No, it's about her influence on you. But he expanded the order on April 1st, which you had to think was like, April Fool's joke or something. But he expanded the order to say, you also can't talk about my family members or Alvin Bragg's family members. So, I mean, it was so overt in the fact that this is a Trump law. That's how they're looking at it. And what he did also was in the second order was he tried finding more legal justification. So he looked back to the gag order that was issued by Chutkan and that was endorsed by Judge Pan in the DC Circuit Court. And he tried quoting from their language there that there are certain scenarios where you have to have concerns, like what if someone's threatening a juror?
Yeah, but that's the way the media was running with it. Like they're talking about a 13-year-old girl when they're talking about his daughter, and they were very slow to. I don't even think that they fully addressed her political function. She's a political activist who worked on the Kamala Harris campaign, who works with Adam Schiff and Democrat PACs, political action committees, raised 90 some odd $1 million. This was reported by the New York Post, and all Trump was doing when attacking the daughter of the judge was linking out, originally at least, to that New York Post article. And so people are still under the impression she's a 16-year-old. They're thinking his daughter is like a Barron Trump situation.
Yeah. And then he was like, basically that he was doing what, that he was trying to basically punch at the judge by bringing in an irrelevant minor who's related as a way of trying to, brutally punish them in a way that most people would be like, all right, that's a line you shouldn't be crossing, right? But that's not at all what was happening here. She's a grown adult who's making millions of dollars.
She's a political activist. Yeah. She's a player, not a spectator in what's going on. All right, so now we all knew. So you filed it originally on Friday. You had some issues of service. They said, now serve it on Leticia James. She closed her office at 4:30. It was closed on Monday. When you get, let's say, how did you serve it, and what happens when you get to court? Who do you present this in front of?
Okay, so there was a whole back and forth with the clerk's office as to how they wanted it filed and creating a NICEF link, because what they have is you can throw it into their basic oversized Dropbox where anyone can throw stuff in, or you can upload it directly to your case, which is what is a normal scenario here. They didn't create a link for me they gave me a docket number and never created a link for me to upload it to my case. So I was constantly putting it into their Dropbox called digital submissions, and the clerk would review it and then say, okay, this is acceptable, or this has to be changed. You have to add this. And they were basically, I spent days trying to meet their approval with what is acceptable for both the petition, the verified petition, what dates should be on the notice of petition, and that all depends on when service is effectuated and things of that nature. Anyhow, at the end of the day, they told me that on Friday that by statute I'm required to serve Leticia James, even though she has nothing to do with this case. It's just a quirk of an Article 78 proceeding, which
the Attorney General needs to be aware of all litigation involving the state.
I guess. I mean, it just says that in an Article 78 proceeding that's brought against a board member or anyone who's government related, that you have to serve the Attorney General. So, and bear in mind, this is all, I blame you and Barnes for this. This is all your fault that you dragged me into this fight, because I'm a commercial litigator by trade. I'm a YouTuber and commercial litigator. He calls me out there. He's like, hey, Joe, he's a member of the media and he's a New York attorney. He should file this thing. And I was like, I can't really come up with a good excuse not to, other than the fact that I know nothing about this area of law and I've never
grow your wings as you jump off the cliff. Barnes sees around corners that people don't even know exist yet. So when he suggested it, there's a damn good reason, and it will be.
And it was only after I researched and I found that there is a case that goes back to the 1980s where the New York Times succeeded in taking off a gag order on Joel Steinberg's attorneys, who was a defendant in a case, because of freedom of the press issues. And that's why I was like, all right, this is the exact same scenario right here. I'm trying to intercede into a criminal action because of issues of freedom of the press by the gag order. So I was like, I have standing here. And the sort was like a little bit of an outline as to how to go forward, but none of those records are findable. You can't find they're all in archives. Anything that goes back to the 1980s. So they're not in they weren't computerized back then. So I had to like try and reinvent the wheel, which is why I missed the fact that I had to serve the Attorney General. So I found that out late Friday afternoon, and then I have to give her 24-hour notice before if I want to bring a motion on an expedited basis because it's an emergency, which is what I was trying to do. So I gave her that. So I served her on Monday, gave her the 24-hour notice. It's when you go and serve the Attorney General or the District Attorney, they actually have receiving windows where it's not like you meeting. I'm not seeing Letitia James. I'm not seeing Alvin Bragg. I'm basically walking up to a window where people come and drop stuff off all the time. With Letitia James, they actually have a whole security system. You have to go down into this basement thing, and there's a guard who walks with you upstairs to escort you up to the window there, and they take your papers. Everyone is very nice here because they're all very professional about it. They know this is New York. People get served all the time. It was much weirder walking to Judge Merchan's office because you don't normally walk into a judge's office to hand them papers that, hey, I'm the guy who's suing you. I even was surprised when the clerk of the court told me that I could do it. Normally an attorney, you can't. Normally an attorney wouldn't serve it himself. And if you're a party, you definitely can't serve it because there's an issue of trust. I guess because I'm an attorney, I don't even know why it is, but the clerk said that's okay, that I can serve personally. And that was the most expeditious way to do it. So that's what I did. But so I served that notice, got all that done by Monday, and then uploaded it Tuesday morning, and had a whole back and forth with the court as to exactly how they wanted my PDF formatted. They were making me crazy. Everything they would tell me one thing, I would upload it. They're like, no, we meant to do it this way. No, we meant to do it that way. And finally, at 2:00, they're like, yeah, we really need you to have it done this way. Oh, and by the way, the judge wants you here at 3:00 for oral argument.
Which judge?
So this was Judge Rosado.
Okay, so you're not presenting this before Judge Merchan. You actually serve it physically, or you give it.
This is not even the same courthouse. This is the appellate court, because when you're suing a judge, you have to go to like the bosses of the judge, which is the appellate court. So we have four departments. The way it works here is the lowest court is called the Supreme Court for one reason or another. And then the court above that is called the Appellate Division, which has 4 departments. Manhattan, which is called the County of New York, is in the first department. So that's where I served. It was in that's where I filed all this stuff. It was in the first department of the Appellate Division. So Judge Rosado was an appellate court judge, and they always have, for an emergency relief in Supreme Court, and I guess also in appellate court now, and this is the first time I have to bring for emergency relief in the appellate court, but they have a judge like on standby who's ready to basically, hear your arguments and give you a decision, boom, on the spot. Because the relief I'm seeking is, I can't wait for a month when this petition is going to be heard to get this relief. I need this relief now. And so when you have that, so I have to give I put in an affidavit as to why this is an emergency. You have to explain to the court why this is an emergency, and then you get in front of the judge. And when I got there, I thought I might be unopposed. I was like, Judge Merchan's not going to come down here. Who's going to come down here and argue? Well, I was wrong, because when they called me down there, I went flying my ass down to the courthouse while I'm having these digital submissions being uploaded and trying to get the clerk to approve them. And I got in there at 3:05, and then I had to give my physical papers and pay for this whole thing with the court. And then they're like, all right, we're going to send you here. The attorneys who are arguing against you, we're sending you down. And so there's an assistant district attorney who came in there, and there was also who's on behalf of Bragg. And then there was an attorney from the Office of Court Administration, and they basically stand in on behalf of judges who are being named in suits. So he was on behalf of Judge Merchan. So those were the 2 attorneys.
So you have 2 attorneys facing you. You're in front of a judge. It's 1 judge of the Court of Appeals. It's not 3.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Because it's emergency relief. They don't assemble a panel for you. They just give you 1 judge.
What's the word that we're in Quebec? It used to be in office. There's a word in chambers. This is in chambers, and like the judge is sitting there waiting for emergency orders?
Well, so chambers normally refers to the office of the judge. It's like what we'll refer to as chambers. This is sort of an in-between. It was not a courtroom. It basically looks like picture it like an office conference room.
In chambers is not literally or always in the actual chamber of the judge, but there's a judge sitting there in chambers waiting to deal with emergency motions. That's who you got in front of.
So I'm not by a stand. I'm not by anything. I walk in, and sitting at the head of this big oak table was Judge Rosado, who introduced herself, and they had me sit on one side of this oak table and the other two attorneys sit on the other side. I cannot describe how nice she was. I'm only saying this because, you know, everyone else in the building there was sneering at me as if I was scum, because the clerks, when I walked in there, I was like, "Hi, I'm Joe Neerman. I'm here because I have an emergency application." And the clerk looks at me with this terrible glare, and he's like, "We know who you are." And because they all had been dealing with me telling them that, hey, I have this emergency thing that I need to bring in here, they were not happy with me bringing this application. The attorneys were looking at it. You have to realize I'm not a name. I'm not anything. So they look at me like I'm some crackpot Trumpist. I'm like I'm basically some homeless attorney who thinks I'm going to change the world. So there's literally, like, it's not like even like a lack of respect. There's a palpable disrespect and animosity.
Elitism. Who is this? Who is this? Nobody.
Who is this douchebag who thinks that he's going to like interfere here on this?
How long do you plead for respectively? You present, they rebut, and then you get to re-rebut?
So I thought I was hoping I would get to re-rebut. I went through all my arguments. I went through how there was flawed legal analysis, how there was terribly flawed application. Even if you could have a balancing test, that you have to show compelling need, and you have to show that this is as limited and narrowly tailored as possible when this is the broadest possible thing in the world. I established how you cannot know that his tweets were what did it. Even if we believe everything Alvin Bragg said in his support of his motion, he doesn't know that the reason that someone's calling and harassing or threatening the DA's office is because they saw a tweet from Donald Trump, or because they read an article that Alvin Bragg that New York is trying to lock up the next GOP candidate.
Well, they might be getting hate and harassment because they're seeking to impose a gag order, not because of what's being said in the absence of one. They don't understand this, or I think they do, but
right.
All right. So you present all your arguments. And
I present all my arguments.
I fleshed out your arguments when I went through your motion. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
They then retort. How long do you present for?
So and this is what I'm saying, she was so nice. She really was. And she's the most accomplished one out of everyone in the room. You're an appellate court judge, and she's a relatively young woman. That's someone who's probably knows how to be cold, calculating, and a jerk, and politically to get ahead. I'm not saying that about her individually. I'm just saying someone to attain that position. You don't get there by being Pollyanna. And yet when I walked in there, the first thing she's like, "Hi, I'm Judge Rosado, and I'm going to be presiding over this. I just want to make sure I get the pronunciation of your name properly, and I'm going to let you speak first, and then I'm going to let the other side." Like, she was like so nice and trying to make me feel comfortable that and compared to everyone else in the building who was looking at me as if they literally wanted, to do me physical harm.
To shut you up.
For YouTube's sake, we'll say do me physical harm. So and she let me go for as long as I wanted. And I try not to take advantage of that by, condensing what my legal arguments were. And I also hit very hard about, how this reeks of unfairness. The one thing that she saw, this was funny, in my papers, you went through them. In my papers, I talk about how not only is there a Peacock special.
This is her, Lynette Rosado?
Correct. Yeah, that's her.
Well, I don't know how old this picture is, but yeah, she looks about 45. I mean, she looks pretty young for a appellate judge. Okay. There's no crows. She just looks young. I mean, that's what I'm saying. None of these bags and these.
Not what you and I have with the crow's feet over here.
It's makeup. We don't wear makeup, Joe.
I'm just saying. And she was, throughout the entire time, she was just very, very nice to me. At least as far as being polite. It wasn't like she was like looking to do any favors for me, but which I didn't expect her to be that way. I was expecting her to be kind of aggressive, like, okay, make your point, counsel, and let's move on. But she was not like that. So then one thing she had seen was that I included pictures, screenshots of Michael Cohen's mea culpa stuff, where he basically talks for an hour blasting Trump. The title of every one of these podcasts that he does, and he does them like 2 or 3 times a week, every one of them is Trump is deranged. This is why Trump will lose. I mean, he's killing him over and over again. And when you see pictures that in the last 2 months, there's been 25 podcasts, and 24 of them identify Trump by name in some derogatory fashion. And this is how he's able to poison the public. And Trump is not even allowed to respond to anything that he says. And he's the criminal defendant. And this guy's going to be testifying against him, and he's the criminal defendant. And this guy can talk about him, but Trump can't respond back to him. It sounds insane.
Oh no, Joe. Let me bring up one concrete example while we're talking here. This is Michael Cohen. I had to verify it. It seems to be the official Michael Cohen account. Let me back it up again. In case you were curious what happened to the defaulted $175 million appeal bond, now only $160 million more to secure our New York Attorney General to seize. And then I replied to him and said, it actually, that is a ratio. That's a ratio. I said, so this convicted perjurer gets to attack Trump on Twitter, but if Trump rightly calls this convicted perjurer a convicted perjurer / sleazebag, Trump gets brought in on contempt charges. Michael, you're a courageous man attacking a gagged man. Come on my channel for an interview. I will ask all the questions Trump can't. DM me if interested.
Nice.
Or do what cowardly sleazebag convicted perjurers do, continue to punch at a man whose hands are tied behind his back.
Nice.
I have yet to get
he's getting fat and rich by attacking him also. So I threw all this out. Their response, so the assistant district attorney, and I'm not going to call these people out by name. At first, he spent the first 5 minutes saying how there is no basis in law or in fact and starting citing case law for me to get for a reporter to delay the trial of Donald Trump. And I'm like, dude, I didn't ask for that anyway. You heard me argue here for the last 15 minutes. I didn't mention that. It's nowhere in my papers. Like, you didn't even read my papers. Like, literally didn't have enough respect to spend the 10 minutes because it's double spaced 15 pages. I mean, how long does it take to read that if you're an attorney? Didn't give it the 10 minutes to actually read what I wrote. That's the level of like, this is a joke. This is a joke application. And from their perspective, this is a joke application. I don't even have to read it. I'll just get up here and give the same arguments I gave a week ago in Trump's application. And that's why he thought I was moving to delay the trial. And then he goes on there. And basically, the one thing that he said, which I knew was going to, push the judge if she needed any pushing, I don't know, but was going to push her, was essentially that people are scared of him. We get calls and complaints from jurors, potential jurors, from witnesses that they're terrified of him and what he's going to say to ruin their lives. And this is, and they're legitimately terrified of him. And that's why this gag needs to stay. That's not a legal argument. There's no exception in con law for like he's scary. There's no such thing. It doesn't even make any sense.
My feels.
Yeah.
Okay, and now, so they present what will be the same argument for why it was issued in the first place.
Yeah, and then they said this has been decided. That was the other thing. This has been decided
twice.
It was, yeah, and so this was also funny, is that he started, the first guy started saying that I don't have a right to be here because being a member of the media doesn't give you any added standing over the public at large, which is technically true. It's technically true, but that was his argument, that just because I'm a member of the media, that I'm still just like everyone else. But the counter to that is, yeah, technically anyone who's actually interested and can establish their interest in hearing from him should have standing. Yeah. The other guy gets up, the second guy gets up, and he's like, he's not even a member of the media. He's got nothing to do with the media. He's just some blogger. And I'm sitting there and I'm wearing this around my neck there. I'm like, really? He's like, he's just some blogger with a YouTuber, some on YouTube that he talks to his little audience there. He's not with a credited news agency like CNN or MSNBC or ABC News or even Fox News. He's just some blogger. So he has no standing here. I'm like, this guy's telling me I have no stand, that I'm just an ordinary guy, and that's why I don't have standing. He's saying I'm not a member of the media, and that's why I have no standing. They're literally saying opposite things here, and it's just, ignore him. And it was so apparent that they had nothing to say about my argument about the legal analysis, that you need to have a constitutional basis to a protection that you're seeking. They had no argument about the misapplication, the lack of compelling need, the lack of tailoring of this order. They had no argument about the Sixth Amendment issues with the fact that he's being hamstrung while Michael Cohen is punching him and punching him and punching him, and the blatant screaming unfairness of a criminal defendant having to go through that. They had no argument about that at all. It's just, this has been decided. It's like Jake Tapper saying, it's debunked, it's debunked, it's debunked. When it's like, what, how? That's not an argument. So I was like,
No,
I really should win here.
Well, yeah, except all they're going to do is repeat what they said to get in the first place, and they're all the gentlemen of the bar protect the gentlemen of the bar, to quote Barnes. And so
that's why what I think is this, though. Like, I was like, they really are looking at me like I'm some crackpot who came off the street.
Yeah,
like, that's
sure.
that's how they're looking at me. And unless these are important legal issues that, this, because if this is allowed to stand, it's much, much bigger than Donald Trump. Because if we now change the landscape of where a gag can be issued, that it's just fair administration of justice, you literally can say that in any case, that we need to have fair administration of justice, and that justifies silencing a defendant. And this will be used against any political enemies all the time. You have way too much influence. God forbid, Viva, if you ever found yourself in the crosshairs of the government and they trumped up some charges against you, it's very easy for them to say he's got a massive following of,
and I told Trudeau to go fuck himself. I mean, that's
right.
A terrible thing
and
to
that
say.
People respond, and that people respond. And we got this one person who called up and said that he wants to do physical harm, and it's all because Viva tweeted out, and there'll be a gag order on you, for sure. So, and it's like, it's ridiculous. You can always claim fair administration of justice. You have to have a yardstick if we're going to protect our First Amendment rights from being routinely infringed.
Well, no, they are going to be converted into, what's the word? Aléatoire, capricious privileges in the eyes of the government. It's no longer a right. You have it when they say you have it.
Yeah.
But so bottom line, Joe, the judge, what does she do? She deliberates, or does she issue it sitting right there?
She issued on the spot. Like, they made us wait 15 minutes, and she signed off and said, interim relief application denied.
That's all. Was there a...
Four words.
4 words, okay.
4 words.
No motivation, because obviously there's not... Does she say a motivated judgment to follow, or no? Or a written ruling to follow?
No, nothing at all. But that's not, just to clarify procedurally, that's not the end of this case. It's not even technically the end of my motion. It just means that my request for an immediate relief is denied. And then they say, come back on May 6th. And then I'll argue before a full panel. And that's actually televised. That's actually, you can actually,
well, I will be live streaming that, Joe. You'll send me the link. You said May 5th?
May 6th.
May 6th.
Yeah. So
beautiful.
Maybe I'll have you host my channel for me. I'll let you log in.
We can co-stream. We'll do it cross-platform. We'll make a party out of this.
Yeah. So that's May 6th.
The interim, the emergency relief denied. No further justification. You'll have an argument before a panel of 3 judges at the time.
I don't know if it's 3 or 5. I'm not even sure it's 3 or 5.
Just so long as it's more than 1.
Yeah, it's gonna be more than 1. It is gonna be more than 1. But my point is this: they're gonna look at me. The other side looks at this as, there's no way I can possibly win here. He's a crackpot. He's a lunatic. He's some YouTuber who's talking to 7 friends online and thinks he's a journalist. Something that's how they're looking at me, as like, I'm some idiot. So, and that's how the court is likely to look at me. I mean, I have to have that concern, and that's why I was like, these are really important rights, basic understanding of interpretation of Supreme Court precedent. I need to really find someone who's an attorney who has stature, just for them to even listen to the argument.
But that's a double-edged sword in a sense, and I appreciate the idea. Get Dershowitz to join in. Doesn't even have to do the work. Bottom line, though, you could have like a Steven Crowder of the media. They'll say, well, he's an extremist. We are going to deny him relief. You have Dershowitz come in. They're going to say, oh, he's now a Trumpian. He's to be disregarded. They won't make the underwear joke with Dershowitz. Get Turley in. I understand that they'll find a reason one way or the other, but it wouldn't hurt. Have people attempted? I mean, I tagged Dershowitz, and I'll speak with him directly.
If you can, I'd appreciate it.
But like, tag Turley to maybe even add their name.
I didn't think of Turley. He would be great too.
He would be ideal.
Yeah, Jonathan Turley would be great. In fact, now that you mention him, he's going like to the top of my list, because he's not yet been disreputed by the left as someone who's, you know, in league with Trump.
Well, I don't know. He's a regular on Fox, so I think that does him in. But they will not be able to discredit him, except in as much as he defended Trump during the impeachment. I think he's wicked smart, so he would be good.
He is.
He's never replied to me on Twitter, and I don't think that's because he hates me. He either might not know me, or it might be too politically controversial.
But I just think that clarification of these constitutional precedents, because look, what I said here is perfectly consonant with every case I've seen on point until Trump comes along. Until Trump comes along and Pan comes up with her own thing, I've never seen anyone argue that a gag is, which is called a prior restraint on speech, has ever been thought to be applied in a situation where it wasn't a constitution. There wasn't someone's constitutional right that they were trying to insulate and protect. That's the only time that it ever comes up. But it's never been worded precisely like that. They say heavy presumption against the constitutional validity of a gag order, and all these things about how they hate gag orders. And every time they've been considering it, you know, they've made reference to, and on the other side, you have this person's 6th Amendment rights or 14th Amendment rights, but they never expressly said you need to have this. Now, I also found a second department in New York case where they basically said, you know, they were going through the same analysis, and they were basically fixating on the person's 6th Amendment rights. So everything I've seen is consistent with this. It's never been expressed that it must be to protect a constitutional right if you're going to be infringing on First Amendment rights. That's something which, honestly, the Supreme Court, if we can get this case up to the Supreme Court for them to actually make that determination that you can never infringe on those First Amendment rights unless it's protecting someone else's constitutional right, which is the way the law should be. That's how you actually guarantee that the First Amendment actually is as foundational and difficult to unearth from its bedrock position is by saying that's the only scenario, that's the only power that's strong enough to ever move that bedrock is someone else's constitutional right. That's how we protect this First Amendment. That's why this needs to be fought, and it needs to be fought by someone who's going to be taken seriously. As much as I can throw my heart into it, I could argue with the logic of Socrates and the brilliant tongue of Frederick Douglass, and I will still, because of gravitas, because of a lack of having a name, and it's also I'm representing myself. It just makes the whole case seem much smaller than it is. This is a big deal.
I will apply for Pro Hac Vice in New York, and I will come.
Please do. By all means.
I'm joking. I can't, but
I cannot. I will keep fighting this alone. I'm just telling you, if that's how this goes, we will lose on this.
Well, just get everyone out there who's watching now. Snip. I'll snip this segment, tweet away, and tag the Dershowitzes of the world, the Turleys of the world, and get someone who's in New York. There's a lot of reputable people who can, legitimize your efforts. I don't think it's quite it. Look, I don't think anything's going to change it, because I think it's a foregone conclusion. But if to the extent you think it'll legitimize,
it certainly can go to the Court of Appeals here in New York, the highest court in New York. It can, because that's the next level. It can, and if Court of Appeals rejects it, it can go to SCOTUS. And I'll tell you, wouldn't that be cool if good logic became landmark case in First Amendment law? It'd be easy to remember, right? The good logic case.
It'll be amazing, Joe. But so it is going to be aired May 6th.
That's what,
dude. Get ready.
See you salivating. I see you salivating.
I'm theory. Add to agenda. I'm joking. Siri doesn't work on this phone. Amazing. Okay, phenomenal. What's next on your schedule? When are you live next?
Tonight, I will ask this. Those of you who are watching, I just threw out a tweet on Twitter. I'm at The Following Pro, and I gave a 3-minute breakdown as to why this case is important. And if you can, and with links to like my detailed explanation of the oral arguments. So if you can all share that, I would be appreciative. That's how we get attention of the likes of a Jonathan Turley or a Dershowitz or Jay Sekulow, but people who are like, who can actually give, who's joining into this would actually give this the seriousness that it merits.
Understood. Now, Joe, I'm going to snip and clip this segment when we're done, and I'll put it out on blast as I give everyone the link to Locals and Rumble. Joe, good logic. It is at The Following Pro, PRO. Good Logic is GOODLAWGIC. What is your locals community?
Goodlogic@locals.com.
Goodlogic.locals.com. Logic LAWGIC. I'll put all the links in there after the stream is up and done and wrapped up.
You're also
Joe,
my friend.
Godspeed. I'm going to see you on May 6th, whether you know it or not.
I won't see you, but you'll see me.
You'll feel my presence. All right.
Take
Amazing,
care, brother.
man.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Thank you. All right, people. Next guest is coming, and we're going to take a little bit of a break from the New York travesty to talk about the New York Times travesty. But before I get there, everyone get your butts over to Rumble or Locals. Here's the link to Locals in the chat. The link to Rumble is already there. And while everyone migrates, by the way, I bit my tongue if you see me in a little bit of discomfort or doing this more often than normal, although I do it a lot. As everyone migrates over to Rumble and or Locals, I will read the super chats, which I have not yet gotten to. You'll see he caught on camera, but you really should see the one that snapped the line and got away. That's in response to the fish that I caught. Young teens with home pregnancy tests getting nervous, says Ragnar Rocker. The last one was from Ian. Viva, in the U.S., you won't go to jail for the civil offense. They just bastardized the Constitution by making non-payment of the civil fine a crime. Absolutely. That's what we were talking about in Canada. Oh, they're just giving COVID tickets. You don't go to jail for a ticket. Well, see what happens when you have an unpaid ticket. Go talk to Francois Amalaga, the guy that I did an interview with twice. Jailed for a long time for not paying his COVID fines. Nate the lawyer, all my people are here. The Trevor Bauer story is insane. On the other side, we're going to have Trevor Bauer. We're going to have the contemptuous posts from Trump. And what else do I have in the backdrop here? I have a lot of stuff. Hakeem Jeffries, a woman accused of Trevor Bauer. Robert, oh yeah, a tweet that I replied to that Robert F. Kennedy put out that I think he shouldn't have put out. Good stuff on the other side on Rumble and vivabarneslaw.locals.com. What else do we have here? That's a Nate the lawyer, by the way, who just put out a banger on the Trevor Bauer story. Well, Leslie really appreciates Viva promoting Good Logic's efforts in this case. My pleasure. And Harman, $10. I hope he didn't mean to put in a comment. Now, Rumble and continuation with the big stories. We're ending on YouTube, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. No, I don't want to open up the window. I want to end it on YouTube. Come over to Rumble, ending on YouTube, 3, 2, 1. Bada bing. All right, now, this is a young lady that I met at our vivabarneslaw.locals.com meetup up in Vegas, in Nevada, with Barnes over the weekend. And she was with Ariadna Jacobs, who's had her lawsuit litigation against Taylor Lorenz in the Washington Post. I know very little about this story, but except for our brief discussion, and I kind of wanted to keep it that way, because if it involves the New York Times and discrediting that rubbish institution, that rubbish, I say this is, it's a rubbish accolade. I'm sure if I ever published a book, I would want it to be on the New York Times bestseller list. I say that, but I've never even wanted any lawyers that they give for awards, any awards that they give for lawyers. Lonnie was apparently on the New York Times list for all of 12 hours before she was yeeted, and there's some controversy. I hate that word. It's controversy as to why that happened. So a brief interlude. We're going to get away from Trump and then get back to Trump afterwards. Welcome and say hello to Lonnie. Is it Sarem or Sarum?
It's Lanny Sarum.
Lanny Sarum. Lanny, tell the world who you are. I mean, I'm not going into childhood. This is a very, very specific. Ordinarily, I talk about childhood for about a year. Tell everybody who you are, who may not know you.
Well, I'm an actor and a writer, and I wrote a script that Thomas Ian Nicholas, he starred in all the American Pie movies, the Rookie of the Year, and I had worked on turning into a movie. And then I had a